Episode 34. A Sudden Proposal. Jade did not answer his question. Instead, she thought about what he had just said and asked curiously, "So, what about this business deal you mentioned? Marry me." But Dario was not asking. He was stating it with certainty, in a domineering tone. Jade's brain stumbled for a moment and her eyes widened. Every part of her body seemed to pause while her thoughts scrambled to catch up. She thought she had misheard. What? Marrying me is the best choice. I can help you, and you won't need to marry that old man. This deal will absolutely be worth it for you. Jade's face was filled with terror, her eyes and her mouth frozen wide open. It's not about whether it's worth it or not, it's about... Mr. Foster, you must be joking with me. You're so tall, handsome, and rich. There must be hundreds of women lining up to be your wife, and I'm just an ordinary girl who has nothing. Jade lowered her head, feeling ashamed. She knew where she stood and where he stood, and of the immense difference between them. Upon hearing her words, Dario pondered deeply. He looked into her eyes and said, as if he were distracted, Yes, I guess you're okay looking, but you don't have a good body. We're not compatible." Jade nearly fainted. There was no need to belittle her. Dario changed the topic and made another, even more ridiculous statement. "But, since you've slept with me, you'll have to do the right thing." Jade's jaw dropped. "What? You said nothing happened between us that day. What do you mean, do the right thing?" He couldn't truly want to marry her, could he? Why would he? There was no reason for it, and it was all too sudden. Dario stared at her blushing face with coal-black eyes. He leaned closer to her ear and whispered, "Nothing happened, but you saw everything. You're the second woman who has ever seen my naked body." The second woman? When Jade heard that someone else had seen his muscular body, she felt uneasiness stir within her. Could it be jealousy? "What are you thinking? The first woman is my mother. Now, don't you think you should do the right thing?" Dario grinned with a dangerous look in his eyes. "Mr. Foster, stop teasing me. I know my status. Do you rich people enjoy teasing people like me?" Jade's chin trembled. She thought of Bruce, who had hurt her so deeply that now she feared anyone rich. When Dario saw Jade clench her fists, he grabbed her hands with his. Jade accidentally scratched him with her nails, leaving her petrified with fear. However, he just glanced at the tiny wound and smiled. Then he reached out his slender fingers and touched her delicate chin. "What if I'm serious? Would you believe me? After we get married, you don't have to worry about your grandma's medical bills anymore. You can do whatever you want, and I won't stop you. I'll give you everything I have." Jade trembled when she heard those words, because she could see the seriousness in his eyes. She simply could not believe that such a fine man would want to marry her. She was only 21 years old. To be honest, she had never thought about marriage. Plus, she'd only ever been in one relationship. This was all too sudden. But why me? She understood the status gap between them. If he wanted, he could easily marry a famous celebrity. As for her, she was just an ordinary orphan who had nothing. "Because all I need is a partner I like who is pleasing to my eye," Dario answered with a shrug. Jade was speechless. As long as she was pleasing to his eyes? That was a very simple demand. Does Mr. Foster find me pleasing to his eyes? It made no sense. Really, he should hate her instead. After all, when they first met, she'd been drunk and had thrown herself at him. If he really truly liked her, this man certainly had a strange taste in women. Be glad. What? I just said that you're the only woman who's pleasing to my eyes. That should make you happy, shouldn't it? Jade was nearly speechless. What was going on with this person? Did he think that all the women in the world would just fall over for him? Mr. Foster, has anyone told you that you're very full of yourself? Full of himself? Dario raised his thick eyebrows. His face darkened, but he smiled oddly. No, but that's because no one dares to speak the truth to me. Why? Because they're all afraid of me. Jade was perplexed. Afraid of him? Why would they be afraid of him? Dario Foster did not look very scary. But, Mr. Foster, after all, since you're so successful, You do have reason to be a little... Without waiting for her to finish, Dario again pinned her down with a smile on his face. What's wrong? Would you rather marry that old man who needs to take Viagra to get it up? I'm so much better than him, don't you think? Richer? Better looking? Oh, and the most important thing? I'm stronger, and I can last even longer than him. I promise you'll be satisfied. Dario's voice was becoming softer, more seductive. Jade blushed as she listened to him. When she couldn't take it anymore, she reached out his hand to cover his mouth. This man, why was he always like this? Can you stop saying those kinds of things with a straight face? What kind of things? Forget it. I have no energy to argue with you since I can't win anyway. Jade turned her head to the side, but the sudden rosiness of her cheeks gave her away. Dario smiled and wrapped his arm around her waist. Oh, is that so? You'll just have to get used to it because soon you'll be my wife. Jade snapped her head back around and stared into his enchanting black eyes. Hey? Who said I'll soon be your wife? Oh, then whose wife do you want to be? That old man is probably crippled now. Doubt he'll ever be able to get it up again. Whatever poor woman marries him will never have a sex life. Dario pursed his lips. His eyes flashed displeasure. How could there be a woman who would even think of rejecting Dario Foster's proposal? I'll never marry that disgusting old pervert. Jade could hardly bear looking at Victor Carson. Why would she ever want to marry him? Then marry me, and you'll have everything you could ever want. Dario touched her pale pink lips with his thumb and looked into her eyes.